Well, this showed up. And now we're kind of moving the shop up the hill, so I don't have my normal facilities around here to bar it up and stuff like that. But this is the Holzfforma. I spent about $265, $268 to be exact, delivered to my door. That's including shipping and tax. And that's well, g372xp. And the first time I experienced one of these was several years back, and I had mixed results with it back then. I'm kind of curious to see what, well, 7 or 8 years has done to the evolution of this series of chainsaw. You can hear it rain in the background if you listen. And one thing that Holzfforma does well is pack. It was very well packed, and it came undamaged. Has 2 bucking spike options. I'm going to use this one. And one of the first things that I've noticed is that's actually a little bit thicker than the first versions of those that I've seen in the past. Of course, what I'm going to do is install them and cut back the lower spike like I do. And nice scrunch comes with it. I'm sure the tools are there in order to install the bucking spikes. I probably need to go to the shop to do that. It's got one of those open mufflers, little tiny hole. Need to do something about that at some point. And it's actually a nice looking saw. So I'll go through and, pick it over and tighten things and determine what the future brings for this saw. Probably what will happen is I'll run it as is just for a period of time, just to get a baseline, let it break in. And then I'll go find a test log to make some test cuts. And then after I've done that, if it runs good, we'll just run it, right? But if I think there's a need for a little bit more, we'll go through our standard routine that we used to do on, these aftermarket saws. And that's like check the squish. And if I have to cut the cylinder, I got to cut the cylinder. If not, if I can do a base gasket delete, that works too. And then open up the muffler. And if I get, the squish in a reasonable range, somewhere between 20 and 25 or even 30, maybe it gets a pop-up piston just to see what it does. But I'm not going to do extensive modifications to this chainsaw. Don't think I will. But it will get firewood use, and we'll just see whether or not a saw that you can buy for under $300 can produce enough work to justify the expense. Of course, my first instinct, having a little bit of experience with these things, is, and what I expect, is a reasonably good running saw. Certainly really hard to beat that kind of performance for the money. And I don't know if you've paid attention to my channel, but if you go back, I had experience with these and actually did quite a bit with the aftermarket 372 parts, cases and stuff like that. And what I had found was, most people, they run fine. Things rattle off and you replace them and do OEM things here and there. And but the Achilles heel on these, for me back then, was the material in the cases. If I left them alone and didn't do much to them, they ran as long as you wanted to run them. But when I jack compression and up the RPMs and do the things that people like to do to make saws scream, and then put it in a professional environment, 6-8 months later, the bearing pockets were all pounded open and it was sucking air. The bearings didn't fail. Crank didn't fail. But the cases were a little soft. That's what I found then. You can go back to look at my videos if you want. So I'm curious. I'm kind of curious. But now I'm looking at this with a little bit different perspective. Back then, of course, the first thing I wanted to do was to crank it up and get some more RPMs and compression out of it, more power. I'm less interested in that now than I am about just life with a saw type things. Can I get it to start easy? Fuel usage? Does it vibrate? You know, things like that. And then, as far as power is concerned, the definition of win for me is, as I've said a bunch of times, if I put a 28 on it, when I got stuck in a tree or stuck in a log, can I just hit the trigger and have it just start cutting? Or do I have to pull it out, rev it up, and push it back in? So if it's got that punch to get the bar and chain, or the chain moving without me having to pull the bar around, that's a win. Then I don't have to do much to it power-wise. That's enough. And if it's got the throttle response where I can do limbing with it, that's also enough. So the thing is, if it has enough performance, the desire for me to tear into it is a little bit less. But if I decide I really like these things again, I might get another one and just for fun, just see how fast we can make it turn. But right now, this one here is going to be evaluated with a little bit more mature mindset about how useful is it for the money versus what can I get out of it from a performance perspective. So, nice looking plastic. You know, like I said, you got the scrunch. It's a nice looking tool there. We'll put the bucking spikes on it another time. Let me pop the cover and see what we have underneath. Yeah, that all looks pretty much the same as it did. I do notice that the color of the casting looks a little different. I'm really curious. And one of the issues they had early on was the intake on the cylinder itself was a little bit too long, and it pushed the carburetor back. Doesn't seem to be the case. We'll figure out if it doesn't seal, that would be the problem. Everything seems to work. I don't know how hard that is to release. I don't have a pair of pliers down here to bite on it with. But looks nice. There we go. Innovate, right? I may want to do something different there. We'll see. See, I've always liked those aluminum intakes there. See if it gets to full throttle. Trust me that it does. You know, tank vent up here. Look at that. Pulse line. Yeah, it kind of looks like a 372, you know. Nice and tight. Yeah. Not going to fire it up in this video, but I mean, from what I'm seeing right now, it's starting on the right foot. Pop these out. I'd say the only thing that I'm not a fan of I'm seeing right now is one of the same things that I wasn't a fan of back then, and that's the feel of the handle. It's not that it's bad. In fact, it feels a little stiffer than the one I used to be able to almost flex it with one hand. But actually, I don't know. I think it's better than it was, but I like the thicker OEM handles, and sometimes I actually put the X-Torque handle on there on my 372 builds. But yeah, all nice looking stuff. Oh, knocked that off. Huh. Yeah, I think that's a better fit. Because before, you could see the intake boot wasn't fitting well with the cover. With the way the casting was. I'm looking in there and it looks good to me. Yeah, I'd say there's improvements. And the color of the material on the cylinder looks a little bit different. And I don't see the sagging fins like I saw on the first ones that I had dealt with. So, yeah, it looks to me like these are improved. There's my first impression. And I don't know if I'm going to get it fired up today or not. Well, since it's based on 372, you get the benefits of a 372 style saw, because you get the external sprocket, internal clutch, and of course all the side covers and things will swap over with OEM. But that's a nice casting right there. I don't know if they've got aluminum in there or magnesium, but it's a nice feel to that cover. I think that's an improvement. And one thing I can absolutely tell you without a question is the material they're using in these bucking spikes is way, way, way better than what was there in the past. They're freaking hard. I cut the bottoms off like I always do. Cut them back. And I'll tell you what, my chop saw had to work to get that done. So if that trend continues, this could be a scary proposition to some of the OEMs. We'll see. You know, we'll have to see. But for that kind of money, with that kind of capability, it's hard to beat that. Now, I understand I did pretty well the G395, but that's another $100. But still, you know what I'm saying. So far, I've been very, very, very pleasantly surprised with the build quality and the fit and finish of the saw. That's a bit of a surprise to me. And you got to remember, I've had a lot of experience with these, you know, back in 16, 17, 18, 19, that period of time. It looks to me like they've evolved in a positive way. At least that's my first impression. We'll just have to wait and see, right? So there you have it. It's set up, ready to go, but it's just really, really nasty outside. And I didn't have a Holzfforma bar for this saw just yet, but it may, if it's got the power, earn the 28. Right now the 28's on one of the other 572s, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays. And I cut the buck and spike back. Found out that stuff is really, really, really hard material, which is good. That's a good thing. So we'll just have to wait for the weather to change, and then I'll run it stock for a little while just to let it break in and understand what it is. And then, hey, you know, if it's ready to rip, I'll let it do that. We'll just let it go. But if it needs a little more power, well, then we'll look at our options. So anyway, here's a quick update. So now we have two saws. waiting for the weather to change. I put that one together last night, and I mean, it should run fine. I haven't had a chance to fire it up. And then, of course, this little Holzfforma, and it's riding with a pair of 572s. So if comparisons have to be made, we can do that. And what I was thinking is this is a pretty much stock 572, and it does okay with that 28. It's just on that edge of being able to snap it loose in a tree, you know, when I have it stuck all the way through in a big hard maple. And of course, the goal for me on this 572 is to get it to where the other ones are. I have that one right there. Actually, I've got 3 of them now that are set up for felling that work pretty good. You know, a little compression hit, buck and spikes with the bottom cut back, stuff like that. So this is the last one that I need to work on. But I'm kind of tempted to leave it the way it is right now and just use it for a general saw. But what may happen is if this guy right here shows it's got enough power, this bar and those chains will end up on that one. And this will get something different. So that's where we are.